All right, welcome back. I'd like to highlight now our next MBE, Tilt Creative. Tilt was founded in 2018 by owners Ron Carey, Stacy Murphy, and Dave Trounsell. They make well-crafted strategic content for ambitious brands with all kinds of stories to tell, such as Capital One, Audi, HP, and Walmart, and they make it easy. So we'll roll the video, and when we return, the next voice you hear will be Ruben Asando.
Some of the drawbacks of doing things the old way is that it was done for a different sort of speed that we were all working at.
That process makes me think about friction. We used to treat what we do much like an assembly line.
A project would come in, the account people would handle it, then it would go to the strategist, come to the creative team, go back and we'd present to the client.
From phase to phase, there's always the potential or possibility that a ball's gonna be dropped.
We've already had so many stops and starts, and then you begin this whole other stop and start process with an outside production company.
You've got a director, you've got an editor, you've got an animator, and then did we think about music?
Guys, this music could be a lot better.
A lot of things could have been better.
We just knew there had to be a better way, a more efficient way, a smarter way.
We had already been working together for the past 10 years, so when we decided to join forces, it completely made sense.
Partnership's a natural part of who we are. It always has been, and as a result of that, it's something that we feel like we naturally bring to our client relationships.
Having our team in place from the beginning of the project is a huge advantage. It really gives us an opportunity to really think smarter from the very beginning with the right people and the right disciplines.
We know each other's strengths, so when a project comes in, it's very easy to identify the right people to put together on a team who can ensure that whatever we do is gonna be the best product at the end of the day.
When I look at our work, I'm sometimes astounded as to how it stacks up against others.
We've got partnerships with the likes of Walmart or Capital One or Audi or HP.
Kind of do a little bit of everything, actually, from a down and dirty two-man shoot to an international shoot with over 100-person crew.
We're not a company that believes that a job can be too big or small. We love all of it. We're curious. We're makers.
There isn't a pixel we don't touch, so that's online video, social, outdoor display.
You'll find us on TV, you'll find us in Walmart stores. You know, just about any medium we make content for.
We want the work to be impactful. We want it to help drive business results for our clients. We want it to help solve a problem for them.
We fundamentally believe that, we haven't done anything right if we haven't been good to each other.
The Tilt way is easy for me. That's about good people. They want to do the right thing. They want to be helpful. They want to be collaborative, and they want to do really great work.
Tilt is wonderful because there's so much less ego than any other place in the business.
We don't spend much time complaining about budgets or timelines here. We just take everything as it comes.
I love a challenge so much that I dare you to bring me something I would walk away from.
You do the best you absolutely can until you can find a better way. Once you know a better way, you do it. That's the Tilt way.
Hello and welcome to the CPO panel, a conversation with CPOs across various industries. We are fortunate to have been able to secure some of the country's finest CPOs, and they've agreed to give us insight into the agility of procurement. This is the first CPO summit hosted by the CVMSDC, and it's no doubt will be the last. I am Ruben Asando, Director of Supplier Diversity here at Capital One, and together with Jeff Conley, will be the moderators for this conversation. Hello, Jeff.
Hello, Ruben. What an honor it is
How's it going?
It's great, sir. It's an honor to share the stage with CVMSDC's 2022 Advocate of the Year. Congratulations again on your winning that on last night. If you missed our award ceremony yesterday afternoon, you missed a great time. So I'm excited about today's CPO Summit. My name is Jeff Conley. As of yesterday, I became the immediate past chair for CVMSDC. And I work for Henrico County here in Richmond, Virginia. I'm the Supplier Relations Manager, and so excited about this team of CPOs and the value and all that they will bring to this discussion. I don't want to delay the discussion any further, so we will just jump right in. I'd like the CPOs to have an opportunity to be able to introduce themselves. And so my first question, and we'll start with you, Clint. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your procurement function, somewhat in layman's terms, and what does a CPO do? I don't want to overwhelm you, but what's a day in the life of a CPO? So tell us who you are, a little bit about yourself, and a day in the life of. Clint?
Sure. All right. Hey, thanks a lot. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Clint Grimes. I'm the Chief Procurement Officer of Capital One. A day in the life, that's kind of a hard question to answer, especially these days, because, you know, as you can imagine, things are changing so quickly. But I can tell you about the function. The procurement function here at Capital One is called Enterprise Supplier Management, and we're responsible for driving strategy, selection, onboarding, and ongoing management of our third parties. You know, most companies like us, like all of us here on the call and all companies out there in the country, you know, we rely on third parties to provide some of the goods and services that are part of driving our ability to meet our customers' expectations. And so what we focus on are ensuring that we've got the right suppliers in the right place at the right time, at the right costs. And nowadays, the fact that we have the ability to have an assurance of supply because of supply chain shortages, which I'm pretty sure we'll talk about a little later, and also risk management. And that's another topic that's top of mind to myself and many of my peers, given what's going on in the world right now. But so no real day in the life. Is the day in the life last week is different from this week, and it'll probably be different next week. But I'm happy to be here, and I'm really excited about the discussion.
Clint, thank you so much. And thank you, Capital One, for being our sponsor of this event. So we certainly appreciate that. Wendy, we would love to hear from you.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Jeff. I'm Wendy Wellinger. I'm the Vice President of Shared Services and the CPO here at Dominion Energy. I've been here in this role since January 1 of 2018, but I've been at Dominion Energy for about 33 years. I started as an intern right out of college and loved the company, and I stayed. However, I've had a lot of diverse background. I'm not a supply chain professional. I started in nuclear operations, went on to hold positions in supply chain. This is actually my third time back in supply chain. Oversight and auditing facilities, and then human resources, where I spent really the majority of my career in business engagement, total rewards, employee engagement roles until I went into the Chief HR Officer in July of 2014, the position I held until I moved into my current role. So I've had a very diverse background here at Dominion Energy, and I like change. I like doing different things. And so I like Clint, I think the reason I enjoy the CPO role so much is you never have the same day twice. And I really like that. You never know what's going to hit you. When you come in, you can't imagine I can't imagine a role where you had the same day exactly over and over and over again. I think that would just drive me crazy. I like challenge, I like diversity, I like fixing problems, and I certainly get plenty of that leading the supply chain function, especially today in these day and times. And I know we'll talk about the pandemic and the supply chain disruptions that Clint referenced, but we're all certainly challenged right now in ensuring we can meet the mission. And I think, you know, regardless of what your day looks like, here at Dominion Energy, the focus on the mission is the consistent thing that happens day in, day out. And we all know that. And that's ensuring operational reliability for the 7 million customers, electric and gas customers that we have across the 16 states where we operate. So many people here in the Virginia and the Carolinas know us as the electric company, but we also have a lot of gas distribution customers in Ohio and Utah. So like Capital One, like Clint said, we purchase all the materials and services required to keep our electric grid and gas pipeline systems operating. So that's what we do. We purchase everything that the business, whatever the business, ours happens to be electric and gas, but whatever your business is, that's kind of generally consistent across supply chain organizations. Our customers have to be able to turn their lights on, heat and cool their homes, keep their households operational. And so that is the mission, and we know that. We want to make sure we don't disappoint anybody. And we also purchase all of the equipment that our crews need to do their jobs as well. So the bucket trucks that you see on the road, fleet vehicles, tools, auto parts, etc. So I'm thrilled to be here. I am excited to take part in this and to meet some of my peers and be here with all of you all. So thanks for having us.
Wendy, thank you so much, and congratulations to you and the Dominion team, as you all were award winners as well. And for many of us in this grid, we're excited that you do what you do, because otherwise we wouldn't have power. So thank you so much.
What I'm talking about, right?
Absolutely. Karen, how are you today?
I am doing great. How are you?
I am great. Excited to hear from you.
Good, great. And I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much for asking me to join. This is wonderful. My name is Karen Scottino. I'm the Chief Financial Officer of the Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond, and I also have the CPO responsibility for our organization. The Bank of Richmond is one of 12 Federal Reserve banks. In addition, the way the Federal Reserve System works overall is we do have shared service functions. So the National Procurement Office, which is our overarching, what I would refer to as your national contracts or corporate level organizational contracts, is an organization that runs out of our bank as well to support the Federal Reserve System, and that includes IT technology. A day in the life, I think, as others have shared, is always varied. During the pandemic, which I know we'll get to, was more varied. I think just making sure that we could keep our core mission functions running and ensuring that we were doing the kind of procurement as well as financial support overall for the organization through the pandemic. So that created a lot of opportunities to pivot. The way I would say day in life for me and in our organization, we have strategy, finance, and procurement under the same umbrella. So helping connect the strategy of the organization with our financial picture and landscape with our procurement teams helps to have a more strategic mindset for our procurement professionals. And it's a combination of balancing that and that strategic mindset, supporting your business, as well as managing risk, because we have the vendor management functions underneath in this scope of services as well, which has been a really good support model for our organization and has created a lot of what I would say great partnership through some really tough times, and also is helping us as we look forward. So those are the key things I think I would share, just as we think about partnering as really, that strong strategic partner for the organization. That's what procurement is.
Thank you so much, Karen. And the Federal Reserve Richmond is a strong partner for CVMSDC. We thank you. I know you guys don't get very many visitors now, but I used to always love to come there and get the bag of money. Well, we said to everyone that this was going to be an international CPO summit. And so our next guest is the international in the international CPOs. I know everyone has a broad range, but we would like to hear from you now, Jude.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I'm really honored to be here today. So thank you for having me. I'm Jude. As you can hear from my accent, I'm not from the US. I'm from the Netherlands, actually. Lived abroad for about 20 years, all over the world. I just said earlier, my heart's in the US. That's where our business is. And that's where I actually spend a lot of my time. So I'm the Enterprise Chief Procurement Officer for a company called Jones Lang LaSalle that some of you might be familiar with. We're a commercial real estate company. And I'm also the Chief Supply Chain Officer for our Work Dynamics business. So what we do is we're about 100,000 people globally. And what we do is we purchase, manage any type of real estate, and we have a large funds business as well. Now, in the area where we manage the real estate, we also do a lot of the real estate services for our clients. And that business called Work Dynamics, we've got about 50,000 people. But on a daily basis, we manage over 5 billion square foot of space around the globe. And we've got about 250,000 people from our supply partners on the ground every day. Right? So that is what we do. Our focus is twofold. One is we really drive for value. So we want to create value for our supply chain partners and for our clients. And very often, if you get the platform right, you can drive a lot of value there. We also want to differentiate. For me, differentiation is very much around not just clients and supply chain, but also the communities. So one of my main focuses actually is to drive our diversity spend really throughout supply chain. So like last year, we spent around 1.7 billion against an initial target of I think around a billion with diverse suppliers. And I want that to go to like 5 billion, if not more. So we're really focused on those two things, right? So creating value and helping differentiate through impact on the communities. And then, you know, a day in my life, I've got 4 kids, and I spend most of my time on Zoom nowadays. So half of my time is kind of trying to keep my kids out of the room. And I'm very glad that we can get back to traveling now. So the other half of my time, like every week, every month, or probably 2 weeks, I'll be in the US visiting clients and colleagues. So thank you.
Thank you. I understand Dominique has already extended a person-to-person invitation for our next event. So hopefully we'll be able to see you in the States. Ruben?
Thank you. Thank you all for the insight into your procurement functions. Now let's get to some other conversation. Everyone's life was great in 2020, and then the pandemic hit. Tell us what 2020 was like for you and your team. Can we start with you, Clint?
Yeah, mine, I think it's an interesting story because I joined Capital One during the pandemic. So my pre-pandemic perspective is from another company. So I was in the media and entertainment space. I was the chief procurement officer essentially for a large media company. And our challenge at the time was, as soon as the pandemic hit, we had 400 and some odd productions that were going on around the world. And so all of them stopped. And so we had all kinds of challenges in figuring out how, you know, across borders and across the world, how to get those productions up and running. As you would recall, there were ever-changing requirements from different health ministries and different health departments in different countries and different cities. And not only were they different from each other, but they also changed over the course of the early days of the pandemic. The thing I have to tell you, I learned a lot about the difference between N95 and KN95 and NIOSH, and everybody's nodding their heads. All of these, you know, sort of terms that were never part of my vernacular. I had no experience with before. And then on top of that, how to spot counterfeits. Counterfeiting of PPE was a huge, huge problem. In the earlier days, it kind of slackened off a bit, but it was just a terrible challenge for us. And then you layer on top of that the fact that people, I think it was March 13th, it was Friday the 13th, that was the last day in the office. And suddenly people were standing up their activities and operations at home. And so from a procurement perspective, we have contracts with vendors who are required to provide us services from a location. And suddenly those services had to be distributed in a distributed fashion from people's homes. And on those pieces of equipment, they had customer data, and was that data secure, and was their network secure? Could they get network access? You know, the kids were going to school on the same network that you were trying to do the Zoom call on. And so there were a lot of those challenges, but from a procurement perspective, we had to go back and read through a lot of our contracts to understand what our contracts allowed, were silent on, or forbade us from doing when it came to our service providers having their resources work remotely. In some cases, we had to actually, you know, create addendums to contracts to make sure that we were covered and that the vendor knew what the expectations were. So those early days were, I'm going to, in a word, chaos. I mean, it really was. But also, we had an expectation that it was going to last a couple of weeks or so. You know, we were going to get a handle on it, and we were all going to be back. And so we all left our bags and our coats and stuff in the office. I have to tell you, my coat, I think my tie, a pair of shoes, these things are still at my old employer's offices because they haven't opened yet 2 years later. And so I'm not quite sure if I'm getting those back or not. But you had all of those challenges that were going on. And I will say I was heartened by the kind of leaning in that everyone did and said, okay, this is unplowed ground. Let's figure out how this is supposed to work. Let's pull together these SWAT teams to address different aspects of our supply relationships. We ultimately got productions back up and running. It was a different world. We had to negotiate with, and Jude, I think you have some of these, we had to negotiate with unions to make sure that we were in line with our agreements with those unions as far as the safety protocols for their people. And if they ended up testing positive, was that a sick time? Was that, how did that work? If they had to quarantine, were they being paid for the quarantine time? So it was a really challenging period, but it was a really good learning period. And then the last point, I'm going on too long. The last point is it also really narrowed the focus and sharpened our focus on our business continuity plans and some of the holes in those plans, because no one expected, you probably expected, we did anyway, one or the other or a couple of things to go sideways and how we were going to deal with that. When a whole collection of things or pretty much everything went sideways, those business continuity plans began to show some breaks, some challenges. And so we're better for it, I think. And I think that, we are coming out of this time. I think we're coming out of it better than we went into it.
Thank you, Clint. And it's funny, you describing it. I remember picking up my stuff, going home and thinking we're going to be back in the office in 2 weeks. And 2 years later, we're still working from home. Wendy, could you tell us what 2020 was like for you and your team?
Sure. I feel like I could just say I agree with everything Clint said because we're a different company, obviously different business, but experienced much of the same thing. So, the business continuity planning, we do a lot of business continuity planning, as you can imagine, as a utility. So, we know that storms are going to happen, natural disasters are going to happen, and rest assured, by the time that storm gets here, we have resources in hotels waiting for that storm to pass so that we can very quickly go through and get the power back on. We have outages at a power station, then we have plans to make sure we have backup power while that plant is out. We know exactly how long it's going to be out and we get it back in. So we do a lot of business continuity planning, but the pandemic brought challenges that no one could have predicted. And it was just unlike anything else we had to deal with. We have about 65% of our population can't work remotely. About 35% can. And supply chain is part of that. My non-warehouse staff, my procurement staff could work remotely. And we all did. We went out, I think Friday the 13th was our last day as well. Went out, went home, but 65% couldn't work remotely and need to be in the stations, in the field, in the warehouse, out in on the electric grid, on the pipeline. So we knew that we needed to provide them with PPE very, very quickly and immediately. We couldn't tolerate a gap in not being able to have that. We go into customers' homes and interface with the public on a routine basis. So we actually started buying PPE in 2019 when we started hearing about the potential of COVID and this might be a thing. We thought it would kind of be like the bird flu scare years ago, that we would get prepared and we would have a plan that we didn't have to use, which is great from a business continuity perspective if you never have to use it. So we started procuring PPE. We had our sourcing professionals who normally buy things like IT services and transformers and pipe. We're purchasing N95, non-IOS certified, KN95s. We didn't buy those initially. We did over time when the shortages started really happening. Surgical masks, hand sanitizer, coveralls, respirators, all kinds of things. And our warehouse teams who normally manage materials and supportive operations were receiving pallet after pallet of PPE in central locations and then redistributing those supplies across our footprint. So I kind of joked initially that we kind of turned our central warehouse into an Amazon warehouse and we started shipping things out. And it was just very different. But everybody, the team aspect of this really shone through because people just jumped in and did what they had to do. Those of us who could work remotely did so starting in March of 20, and then we remained there until July of 2021, at which point folks came back into the office and, still had Easter candy sitting on their desk from the year before, just because, we hadn't been there in so long and nobody expected to be out this long. As the vaccines became available, our supply chain team put contracts in place with providers to administer those vaccines, actually led the creation of vaccination plans so that we could get the vaccines administered to our employees on site as quickly as it was made available to us. So that was a totally different focus for us. And then putting contracts in place with testing providers to ensure the safety of the workplace. We had those across the company as well. So the pandemic was a challenge for sure. I think I would add to everything Clint said that I think it caused many business leaders to kind of see supply chain organizations in a different light. So before, if you're doing your job right, you're supporting operations, things are cool, things are good. If you're maintaining that reliability that I was talking about, that was enough. And things went normally. You just didn't notice supply chain, right? Because everything was going well. But now I think it caused senior leaders, based on the reaction and the response of the supply chain organizations, the challenges we were able to get through, the innovative solutions we were able to put in play, to see the value of the critical functions actually performed by supply chain. And it gained many organizations a seat at the table that they just didn't have before. So a kind of a silver lining coming out of a really, really challenging situation. So I'll stop there. But again, I agree with what Clint said.
Thank you, Wendy. Karen, anything else that maybe is different from the Fed perspective relating to 2020 and your team?
I absolutely would echo what you've heard so far. I think, business continuity planning is something that we focus on quite a bit as well. But I would also say that we were stretched because this is different than what we had necessarily planned for. You plan for an event, right? You don't plan for a couple years out of the office. So there was definitely learnings through all of that. I would echo the fact that from a teaming perspective, the strength of the team, and I think it's also with your procurement folks that sometimes can be focused in one particular area or an area of expertise, category management. There was also opportunities to reach across the aisle and help each other out because people were dealing with not only what we needed to solve for from a procurement perspective, but also dealing with family and everything else. So where could you hand things off? So it was definitely an opportunity for growth for procurement teams overall with, maybe supporting different business lines and thinking through things in a different approach. I do agree. I think it had procurement. It gave a great opportunity for procurement for professionals to show up in a more strategic lens because, we were dealing with purchasing things that maybe we haven't in the past. We had critical on-site folks that needed to be on. We needed to get PPE, the vaccines and all of that. I echo, but it was also ability to stretch and help plan. And also if you had supply shortages, what were options to deal with? How did you deal with it and how did you approach? So I think a little bit of that agility and nimbleness was definitely improved throughout this process. And as I walk away from what did we learn, I think some of that flexibility and just, speed and agility were great things that we took away as a team overall.
Thank you, Karen. And Jid, I'm thinking more from the international kind of perspective. How was it like for you and your team in 2020?
Yeah. Thank you. So, excuse me. Very similar. The thing that we had though, we went with the wave. So it started in Japan. I lived in Singapore at the time. I remember being in Bali second week of February, and it was coming, and we were like, "Oh, we'll still go." It was like a trip, and then we came back, and it just came over us. We do business continuity planning. We didn't have a single scenario that covered the size, the scope, the scale, and the timing of this. It was incredible. I think there's a couple of things we saw. One is the economic impact. So we are in 80 markets. In all the markets, there was significant economic impact, changing kind of the financial structures of many companies. As a result of the other thing, with everyone working from home, right? Like we moved 50,000 people to work from home in a week's time, and we were still implementing Microsoft Teams. So similar issues that you guys that we've just heard. And so a lot of offices were empty. So we were dealing with bringing our people home getting our supply chain contracts organized and things like that. And then our clients moved all their people home. So they were sat there with empty buildings. And what do you do with the maintenance, the safety, the security, and also the financials of all those empty buildings? So the good thing was we developed the scenarios and we just went with the wave, and then back again, and then back again, right? So we had pretty good management tools around it. One of my main takeaways was you really get gritty, right? Today we can be busy with lots of things, like things come onto your desk. In that year, I had 2 jobs. I was chief strategy officer for JLL before this role, so I was still helping with the financial planning for the company because we didn't know how big the hit was going to be. And then on the other side, we were trying to manage the supply chain. The last thing I would say about this is the resilience of the world is, I think, that something that really stands out. If you hear the resilience around the virtual table here of people really stepping in, getting involved, keeping the business, and with that, economies, families, communities going, is really impressive. Because if I think about the human suffering that we've seen, physical suffering, people passing away, started in China, India, Europe, Italy was the first actually, and then we had these obvious the devastation in parts of the US. That was terrible. And then after that, we saw a big hit on mental health as well in our region. And so I think we really need to applaud leaders across the world for the resilience that they've shown in putting their organizations through this, because it's been an incredibly traumatic experience for many people.
Yeah, very well said there. I totally agree with all the sentiments that were expressed, and I think we'll definitely look back at this time and really identify how resilient we were, and obviously, Clint, and I think everyone touched on this, business continuity is definitely going to be something that every organization has to prioritize if that wasn't the case before. Jeff?
Great. I think already we've heard, and I have a better understanding about the role of a CPO. I didn't realize that it took so much and how critical the role is to the success of an organization. So thank each one of you. What are, I guess, a part 2, or if we could get more from 2020, because we are still recovering. Clint, what would you say is the biggest challenge that the team, the Capital One team, or those in your role from where you sit, what's the biggest challenge that your team has faced since 2020?
Well, I'm going to bring us all the way into 2021 because it's kind of like, as you were saying, it's kind of like this continuous event. And an interesting thing about it was sort of the unintended consequences or unintended impact. So one of the challenges that all organizations are facing right now, I think, is around talent. There has been, for a variety or a collection of reasons, a move on the part of large segments of the economy to sort of, maybe take stock, maybe to rethink, maybe to figure a different path. And that's impacted, accessible talent and the approach and the talent approaches that organizations are taking. And that then drives, hey, are there things that we're doing with people that perhaps could have an automated component to them? So companies are accelerating perhaps some of their AI, machine learning kinds of trials or pilots or efforts that they were doing in sort of response to, the challenge of getting talent, but also the sort of business continuity plans, and sort of positioning themselves for the future. That's part of it. I think, another part of it really is the economic impact, and so you're having, you had supply chain disruptions that drove and helped, let's say drove, but at least helped fuel inflation. And so suddenly cost pressures are rearing their head. And so organizations are either thinking about, can I pass those costs along ultimately to customers, or can I make my, my activities and my focus more efficient? Are there, things that we can kind of do without? And so people are really sort of, taking stock in nice to have versus need to have kinds of things. And so we in procurement are kind of at the nexus of all of those things. And to what was said earlier, that this notion of a strategic partner, I mean, procurement really was, kind of, if you knew about procurement, that meant something was going wrong, in the past. I've been in this space for 25 years, and that's, either you're coming up with cost savings or you're just making sure that you're not, the nail that's sticking up that's getting pounded. Now you actually have organizations recognizing the strategic necessity of their supply chain procurement, whatever you want to call it, function in their business. I have a friend who is an engineer at Ford Motor Company, and they are building cars like the Dickens, but they're not selling them because they don't have any chips to power the computers that are in those cars. And so there are F-150, hundreds of thousands of them parked in fields all around the country because they just don't have that critical component. So procurement is strategic, and leaders are, and have been over this period, recognizing that and are really providing, and this is, as a CPO, this is kind of, you get a little giddy about it. There's a cabinet position within organizations that a CPO occupies, where nearly 2 years ago, 3 years ago, that wasn't the case. And so I'm personally happy that organizations recognizing that. I wish it wouldn't have been so challenging a period for us to get there.
Sure.
Here. But I can see going forward that seat and that expectation and that input from this function is gonna weigh a bit heavier on the decision making of ultimately the leaders of the organizations.
Absolutely. Thank you, Clint. Wendy, I guess I didn't realize until you began to speak and you talked about the continuity plans that Dominion has. The storm still came, and we still had weather-related activities. And on top of that, the pandemic. What are the challenges? What would you say? What are some of the challenges, or a challenge that you all have faced since that time?
Ruth Clint, like I said before, everything he said, it kind of suits to a T. The supply chain organizations are really dealing with a lot of moving factors right now as a result of the pandemic. It's not just the pandemic, though. And we did a board presentation. I kind of put together a big chart of all the things happened at the same time. It's really a perfect storm. And we had some snow and ice storms, as you just said, in Richmond, back to back to back, or in Virginia. But, there were other events around the world, like a record snowfall in Spain, and catastrophic flooding in Europe, and a dust storm in China, and a winter storm in Texas that knocked out, caused significant record blackouts, and all of those things. And now, of course, the conflict I think Jude brought up between Russia and Ukraine is really impacting availability of parts and materials. There's raw materials, commodities, metals, the chip shortages, things like that. Those translate to shortages of transformers, vehicles, computer equipment, resins, which go into pipe manufacturing. So we are really challenged right now, like never before, with actually finding these materials and buying the commodities that we need. The costs are higher, as Clint referenced, with inflation. So we're really trying to be very strategic in not only what we buy, but how we buy it. Transportation costs are if you can get it there. We've got transportation challenges just on mode of transportation, period, but transportation costs are going up with fuel costs and things like that. And then all of that exacerbated by the labor shortages that we're seeing. So we are starting to see, or have seen, the Great play out a little bit at Dominion Energy, although we typically have very low turnover. Our turnover is higher than it has been in the past for us, but it's still lower than some of our peers are seeing. But that does impact you when people leave. We have a flexible work schedules now with generally 3 days in the office minimum. Can work some flexibility, but you need to be in the office at least 3 days a week. And there are people who, now that they have this ability to be employed globally by companies who are allowing full-time remote work, their job market just opened up from a place in Richmond or a place in Salt Lake City to now they can work for anybody fully remote. And that's going to challenge any organization from a resignation perspective. So we're seeing some of that, again, not as much as some of our peers are, But that does impact you when you're at a point in time where it's all hands on deck and you're really relying on the team to pull it together in support of the company, and you lose folks in the middle. That is challenging on the leadership. And as Karen said, the leaders really deserve a whole lot of credit for continuing the operations as they have, because it's been quite the challenge with all of these things piled on top of each other. We're also seeing some of the labor challenges playing out with, we have a lot of staff augmentation that we utilize for storms and outages and things like that, not getting enough. When you don't have enough, you've got to have those backup plans. And then parts quality of material.
Absolutely.
Manufacturers are dealing with shortages or new people. So, there's just a lot of factors coming out of what may have started with the pandemic, but a lot of other factors and things playing out as well.
Sure. Thank you so much for that. I'm sure many of us will thank our line workers when we see them now, that they were a part of that 65% who didn't get a chance to work from home, but they kept on doing what they were doing. So
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, line workers they have a tough job for sure.
Absolutely. Hey, Karen, just because of the placement of where you are, you get to answer the question the third time, right? But I'll switch it around for you. Tell us about some of the, what are challenges do you anticipate as a result? So we're getting back to work. Are there any challenges that you there at the Fed and in your role have forecasted? What are you thinking about?
So yes, there are. I think a couple things to think about really. We had a lot of projects that we ended up pausing or delaying, either because of supply chain issues or just purely because we didn't have folks in the building. We redirected funds. The Fed being a mission-based organization, all of the profits that we don't spend go back to the American people through the Treasury. So we are very mindful about how we spend and where we invest and what we need to think about. So I think just kind of navigating the supply chain, number one, the gaps and the stickiness, as well as just the overall cost. And when should we and how do we embark on projects and thinking through that, just that kind of navigating that bigger picture. I think the other component, just to share as we think on a go-forward basis, is managing your third-party vendor risk, understanding how all of this, supply chain gaps can impact the parties that you work with, what kind of risk you may have, and how that could impact some of the procurement opportunities you're thinking about, the projects you're thinking about, your ongoing relationships. How do you put that into your full end-to-end strategic procurement process so you support your businesses appropriately? And we've put some thought on what do you think about from that approach, and how do things change just coming out of this? Because people are coming out of it in sort of an uneven way, right? Some industries are roaring back, other ones still have gaps. And, how are you thinking through that? We even think through it, even as simple as we had on-site staff, right, who had to be at the banks through the whole process of the pandemic, because we have cash operations that need to run. We also have third-party vendors on site to supply, food, and what did we do to make sure that we had that through the pandemic? Now that we're having folks return back, what are we doing with our support model for our banks and just those vendors that we have on site, those relationships, how we're bringing people back in from that perspective, even with vaccines and supply chain and timing. There's all of those different components to make sure that people are comfortable in a workspace, and that we're supporting our vendors that are coming in to do work with us in an appropriate way as well. So those are some of the things that we've been thinking about also. So hopefully that's helpful to others.
Absolutely. Thank you, Karen. Jude, how about yourself? What have you guys been intentional you're thinking about relative to anticipated challenges?
Yeah, thank you. So I think we see all the risk. There's risk, if you think about the services and goods that we buy, there's labor-based and then there's material-based, right? We see issues with manufacturing input, with labor rates, energy supplies, especially in Europe, obviously with the current situation with Ukraine. We've got food pricing issues. We anticipate food availability issues, especially across Europe. At the same time, we are really committed to stepping in for our partners, both on the client side and on the supplier side, to see how we turn this around, right? So where can we add value? Return to office is scary, right? Is it safe? Is it organized? Is it transparent? Do people want to come back to the office? Because you've got a whole range of companies that say you never need to work in the office again. You need to be in the office. It's job dependent, like Wendy, you just said. And so we're coming in and saying, okay, this is how we can help you. The second thing is a lot of companies, it moves kind of from San Francisco, like Silicon Valley East or around the world, is the quality of the office is really a big draw, I think, in the environment. So we are really working with our supply chain partners to think about how can we kind of delight people when they come into the office, make it a much better experience. And then the third thing, what we do very proactively, and that's both for our own supply chain and for the external supply chain, is we are using innovation, working with partners to relieve the pressure we see on the labor market. So things like, very simple, we've got probably 100,000 people cleaning on our behalf every day. So if you do that in 24-hour shifts, you have access to more individuals. If you provide transport for women in India, you've got access to more people because they wouldn't be able to drive after dark. If you provide sensor-based technologies, you can anticipate usage rate and you can translate that into flexible schedules. So we actually have we call it like our own tech fund, where we invest in startups and then we implement that in all the buildings that we manage. So that's how we're trying to say, okay, let's be resilient. How are we turning this around and helping companies to thrive in this space and our own employees?
Wow, thank you, Jude. Sounds like CPOs don't sleep, but I'll pivot to you there, Ruben.
Take a little nap anytime you say goodbye.
Thanks, Jeff. So Clint, you talked a little bit about technology there. Technology is pervasive in all that we do, and probably has been even more significant during the last 2 years when most activities went virtual. As CPOs, how are you incorporating emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence and machine learning into your procurement function?
One of the things that, and it predates me, so I won't take credit for it, but I think it's kind of brilliant. One of the things I learned when I joined Capital One was this effort around, as a regulated entity, we have a whole host of regulatory monitoring actions of third parties that we are responsible for. And a lot of that, a number of those monitoring actions are kind of administrative in nature, making sure that we have either checked the box or received, the attestation of something or something along those lines. And one of the things that our CEO, when I first joined, was talking about is this notion of, number one, eliminating what he called arbitrary uniqueness in processes, and then seeking to automate those. And so that's kind of a strategy and an approach that I've seen in spades here at Capital One, here within ESM, is the idea of just looking at our processes stem to stern and kind of looking at, is this component of a process utilizing the skills and capabilities of, let's say, a contract manager? Ruben, you're familiar with that role. Do I need a contract manager to input this data? Well, no, not really. This could be an automated function. Oh, no, by the way, can the supplier input that data themselves as opposed to us getting a hard copy and then inputting? Well, yes, they could. Do we have a portal that we could set? So that kind of thinking around automation, but looking at the process first and seeing other things that are similar across a number of processes, and then automating so you can have a bigger impact on the overall organization. On the machine learning side, one of the things that we are getting to a point where information that comes in a certain form, let's say scanned in documents, can be automatically read and perhaps evaluated against a standard, so that you could end up having the machine make the determination if a human really needs to look at this, if somebody with the JD really needs to be involved in this evaluation process, or is the machine able to compare to a standard, so that verification process, compare to a standard, determine that it does meet the standard, then archive it where it needs to be, and then check it off as a received monitoring action result. So I've seen things like that, but we're actually looking to accelerate that. We're looking to do more. We're looking to understand, are there more complex parts of the process? Are there more complex like inquiries that we can make to information repositories in a way that we can more rapidly understand where we are with respect to a piece of data, something as simple as the status of an invoice, and maybe more complicated as to a status of a contract, or even, hey, the creation of a contract based on inputs by, a contracts manager. So AI and machine learning are, I was going to say, at the core, but that elimination of arbitrary uniqueness happening first, and then applying some standard or structured automation to kind of act as a force multiplier for the resources that we have.
Thank you, Clint. And Wendy, if I may have you, and then I know we seem to be kind of running down on time, so probably for this question, we'll just have Wendy go, and then we'll start with supplier diversity, because I'm sure a lot of us also want to engage heavily on that topic. So Wendy.
Sure. So we've had a very strong focus over the last few years on just being more strategic about how we spend money on materials and services within the supply chain function. And I think all of us would agree that if you can think you know something, but until you really measure it, you don't really know for sure. And sometimes I have lots of examples of where you pull some data and you look and you go, oh gosh, I didn't realize that was happening. But time and time again, utilizing data analytics for strategic decision making comes out with different outcomes potentially if you're looking at the objective facts. Very valuable. So we've set up a center of excellence that really focuses on creating dashboards and other tools using Power BI. We've tried to really roll out a lot of training for our analysts and our teams to utilize those types of applications for dashboards that our sourcing and category management professionals can utilize on a day-to-day basis in making those procurement decisions. We've also been utilizing AI in development of bots to remove manual work. So kind of along the lines of working smarter, if we can remove some manual work that is functional by a bot, then we can free up our teams to focus more strategically and take out that manual administrative component. And again, they're focused on how to spend money and add value across the enterprise, which is what we're all looking for. So innovation or embracing change is one of our new core, it's our fifth core value. We added it a couple of years ago. So thinking about working smarter, utilizing technology more effectively to do our jobs is really becoming a core expectation at Dominion Energy, and we'll continue to do so. So I'll stop there. I know you want to talk about something.
Thank you, Wendy. Jeff?
Karen, here's an opportunity for you to brag about all the great things. I'm a little bit partial to the Federal Reserve Bank, Richmond, but tell us about your supplier diversity resources and how the Fed supports supplier diversity.
Sure, I would love to talk about that. It's a passion point of mine as well. So we are very passionate about supplier diversity at the Richmond Fed. So as a Federal Reserve, we can convene people and we can utilize diverse suppliers. We are not as out in the public facing maybe as others, but so what have we done internally? We have a supplier diversity manager who helps run our program for the Fed, which is super helpful, and he is embedded on the procurement team. So he's a strong partner with the procurement team, and they partner together along with the business lines to kind of drive our program. An initiative we started a couple years ago was supplier diversity champions. So throughout our business lines within the bank, we have champions that help just educate, look for opportunities for diverse suppliers, and are embedded within the business lines and really are our arms and legs out in our businesses, which has been a really great effort. And I'm really proud of a lot of the work the team has been able to advance. And we've grown our diverse spend from 12 to 19% over the last few years. So things have been going really, really well. And it's something that's just a passion point for folks at the Richmond Fed.
Aaron, thank you so much. And we've seen the results here at CVMSDC. Ruben, I think I'll ask Jude the question that's in our chat. Is that okay?
It is, but I think for supply diversity, if it's okay to get around everyone, and then we'll go to that question.
That's perfect. Jude, what would you like to share with us about your supplier diversity efforts?
Yeah. Well, similarly to what Karen just said, it's really at the core of our value set, right? It's a really big topic for us. Being in 70 countries, it means something different in different places. So my focus is on the kind of top 8 countries where we are, like our 8 largest countries, and there we have very specific focus. Because like we just heard, if you can't measure it, it doesn't mean anything. For the US, it's a major focus for us, and we do it through a couple of ways. One is we don't just want to extend volume to diverse suppliers. We want to acknowledge, we want equality, right? We want them to have equal opportunities, and if they're smaller in many cases and they don't have access to cash, we're finding ways to give them access to cash. If they need access to connections or they need access to growth, we have a mentoring program. So we've got a supplier finance program that we're just launching, we've got a supplier mentoring program that we're just launching, and we have a kind of an engagement program as well, where we bring together every year our key diverse supply chain member. Everyone's invited. Last year we had 1,000 people online. This year we'll probably have 400 people in person, where we bring our diverse suppliers, we bring inspiring leaders from across our business and our other relationships, like our clients, on stage with a very deliberate aim to not just kind of distribute the spend, if I can say that in procurement terms, but also to really lift the entire landscape, to help people really get better. And it actually starts with, we've got a big school system that's a big client of ours, and we take their people from there, and they've got apprenticeships in our supply chain group, focus on diversity. So we've got a lot of, like, I could talk about this for hours actually.
I bet, absolutely. Thank you so much. I'm coming to you, Clint, and based on the awards that we had in our award ceremony on last night, Capital One's doing some right things in supplier diversity. What do you have to share?
We're trying, and we're heading there. And I think, we really appreciate the recognition from last night. And I think Ruben said in his comments, is sort of, this is part of our journey. We're on our way. We're not there yet. So we're not done yet. For me personally, so I've been involved in supplier diversity for probably 20 years. And Jeff, as you may know, so I'm the treasurer of the National Minority Supplier Development Council Board of Directors. And so I've been really engaged in growing what our chairman calls driving profitable growth of minority businesses. That's our goal. That's what we're looking to do. And how do we do that? We do that by, helping diverse suppliers, be aware of and be successful at opportunities that are out there. But we also arm them with skills and capabilities and insights so that they can grow their business in a way that is profitable. We just had the graduation of our Elevate program that we partner with JLL on. So Jude and I were talking about that. That was really an hour and a half ago, where we look to, innovative partners, suppliers of ours to help us along this journey. And we're lockstep aligned with really trying to drive meaningful opportunities, not just sort of opportunities to check the box. These have to be, the ability of a supplier, not just to maybe win business with Capital One, but that's not really the goal. The goal is for a diverse supplier to win business. And how do we position them best to do that? And what are the sort of, what can we arm them with, and the skills that we have within Capital One and within our supply chain that we can bring to bear to help them do that? So diverse supplier inclusion is important from an economic impact perspective, not just from a supply chain perspective. And that's how I look at it. And we hope to get to a day where NMSDC, CVMSDC, and the other 22 regional councils, right, are no longer necessary, right? And so, we're looking to put all of our heart and energy and focus on getting us there. So supplier diversity is really fundamentally important to me. It's fundamentally important to Capital One, and it will continue to be.
Thank you so much, Wendy. Last but not least, and we definitely have seen Dominion out in the community in various advocacy organizations. What would you share relative to supplier diversity?
Thank you, Jeff. Yeah, this is something that we at Dominion are very passionate about. I personally am very passionate about diversity and inclusion as a whole. It's diversity of our workforce. We're very focused on that, but also how we support diverse suppliers within our communities. And to Clint's point, it's really about growth and engaging with these suppliers so that they can grow and be more competitive, not just with Dominion Energy, but with others as well. So if we didn't have to have any of these advocacy organizations, that's success in my view. Although I sit on boards of some of them as well, I think they're doing amazing things. But to have diverse suppliers really grow and prosper, that's really what you're looking to support. So we have done several things. We have a program manager who really manages the program for us. He's included with the supply chain team, very integral with the segments, the business segments. And we've actually put this in a compensation package for all of our leaders at Dominion Energy. So if you're a leader at Dominion Energy, you have a diverse supplier goal, not only to hit a target amount of spend, but we host supplier showcase meetings, which brings together diverse suppliers with some of our leaders in the segments to actually start building those relationships so that they can start engaging with the RFP process. We've made some policy changes to ensure that there are a couple of diverse suppliers in every RFP process. We're looking for prime suppliers to subcontract to diverse suppliers. So we've done a lot of things procedurally and incentive-wise to really drive our spend levels up. And we actually set a company record in 2021 by exceeding $1 billion in diverse spend, which we're very, very proud of. It's a record for us. And we're just going to be excited to see that continue to grow.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Keep up the good work. All of you. We certainly appreciate that. Ruben?
Yeah, so there's a question that came in from the audience. It's so important we want to ask. And then we'll go to the final questions that we had for you all. What do you see occurring with the inventory of corporate office space? Are you stopping construction, selling, reconfiguring? What are you doing about office space? Clint, you want to pick that first?
Yeah. So since I've joined Capital One, there were plans on the drawing board, and Ruben, you know this better than I do, around sort of building out our campus in McLean, Virginia. That has continued unabated. I will just from a personal observation perspective, I live in New York City, and one of the things that the pandemic actually helped do was a lot of significant projects in the city actually got accelerated. Like things ended or things got built up faster because there's not all the people and congestion to impact that. And what I've learned is a number of companies are actually increasing their use, their leasing of office space, this new office space, especially to what you talked about earlier. Firstly, this amenity-laden new, setups, those things to attract employees back to the office. But the other one is if we do end up in a more sort of kind of reversing the trend over the years where everybody was going to smaller footprint and workstations out of, enclosed offices. But if we do get to the point where we want to space people out, there's kind of more space that you're going to need to do that. And so a number of large employers at least in Manhattan, whether it's Google or Facebook or Amazon, especially those three, they're actually gobbling up big chunks of this new space in addition to the space they have. So, Jude, I'd be really curious because you've got a much more deeper sort of business perspective sense of this. I just know what I see as a pedestrian.
And I think that's a very good transition. Jude, do you want to pick that up?
Yeah, thank you. So for office space, we see exactly what you say, Clint. If you look at we call that the stock, right? So that's existing buildings in the market. We see the penetration of kind of high-end stock, so built over the last 5 to 10 years, key locations. We see that those are getting picked up. They've been there's a lot of capital in the market, as many of us know, right? Around this table, we all have our kind of connections to that. A lot of capital is flowing into real estate. So there is investment occupiers want to go there, but they want to go to the best buildings because they want to provide that experience to their employees. What we do see is consolidation in some of the smaller cities. We see consolidation, change of use. So we see that offices are being refurbished. So from having desk after desk after desk in open space to more closed spaces for safety, where people can work. And what you see is people really start using the office for the purpose they're there. So I'm in the office to meet, I'm going to a meeting. I'm in the office to do a call, so I'm going to a call booth or whatever it is. So that's the other thing. So grade A space, there's a run on it. Other space, we see lots of refurbishing. And then what we do see is that in smaller towns, and I think this is a global trend, there is some, we see space, as we call it, retiring sooner. So there's a complete refurbishing of the building or repurposing. And we see trends across all the asset classes. I mean, we've had massive work around data centers and logistics over the last 2 years. And I think it makes sense, right? Because everybody's shopping online and we're all, you couldn't go to a store for 2 years and we do our work on Zoom. So our trends really follow the trends of the community.
Thank you, Jude. Wendy, and then we'll end with Karen.
Yeah, so we've done a combination. We have some facilities that we are upgrading just based on the employee experience that Jude talked about. It's so important that employees come to work and feel proud of where they work and they have the amenities that they expect when they're coming into the office. So we are upgrading many of our facilities, but we've also canceled new construction. So anybody who's been in downtown Richmond knows that we have a building that we've just built brand new over the last couple of years. We had our old headquarters that was demolished in about 5 seconds. It was imploded. So it was a hot ticket to watch on a Saturday morning in Richmond a couple of years ago, but we actually imploded it, went down to the ground, cleared it out. The intent was to build another high-rise, a second sister building to the new one that we just built, and decided not to do that. So we're going to be doing some different things with that space, but because we have moved to a more flexible work schedule where people are in the office, many of the 35%, 3 days, minimum of 3 days, and we have collaborative spaces. So we'll have shared desk space, shared office space with some of the new designs that are going in. We just decided we didn't need that building. So kind of a combination of all of this, but consolidating where we can to avoid additional office space that we might not need now based on what we've learned with the virtual tools and the additional flexibility and the ability to get work done that way.
Thank you, Wendy. Karen, anything to add there?
I can add the fact that since the Fed is directly across from where the building was imploded, that we definitely have a broader view now. There's no building directly across from us. The thing I would add, I would say right now we're evaluating. So thinking about our needs in the future, not necessarily going too quickly with that, to make sure that, we are thinking about kind of that footprint of our workspace for the future. So letting folks come back and really sort of feeling our way through what that looks like, but then also evaluating our real estate to decide, do we need as broad of a footprint as we have right now? So and we're still kind of in that evaluation process. We've been bringing people back in waves. Definitely want to see how this goes with more of a hybrid model. We had folks pre-pandemic kind of 3 days in the office, 2 days out anyway. So this isn't much of a shift from sort of the posture we had before. So we're just going to kind of continue evaluating as we go.
Thank you, Karen. Jeff?
Very good. So, Ruben, are there other questions from the chat?
There are no questions in the chat. So we can go to the very final question. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. Just want to be clear. Wendy, I'm going to let you start with this one, okay? You won't have to follow Clint this time, but I'm going to have to remember who to go to next. So the work will be on me. So, Wendy, if you had a crystal ball and could magically make something happen in the world of procurement, what would that be?
Oof, wouldn't we all love to have a crystal ball? I think, if I really had to on this and think about one thing, for all of us, cybersecurity and third-party risk are top of mind, especially right now. Not much keeps me up at night anymore, but if something were to keep me awake, it would be risk around third-party management of data. And so protecting company data in the procurement process is so essential, especially when employee data or customer data are part of that. So my crystal ball, I think, would create a completely secure repository for company data, customer data, supply chain procurement type data that acts as a clearinghouse with suppliers, eliminating data protection concerns. That would be phenomenal.
Absolutely. Sounds good. Karen, how about yourself?
Honestly, I would agree with Wendy. I can't really add anything more. That is
Sure.
absolutely it.
Absolutely. I can imagine, particularly in the business that you're in, that's very critical, as it is
That's
for all of us.
exactly it. That's exactly it.
Absolutely. Jude, anything that you would offer? If you had your crystal ball, anything?
Yeah, I think on top of that, it's about efficiency, right? If we could just make the supply chain transparent to a point where we can efficiently drive resources to where they're most needed. I think through data and technology, I think so many people and companies would have been better off through this pandemic, right? And fundamentally, the supply chain process is extremely inefficient. And so I completely buy into the comments around risk. So that would be my crystal ball to solve my problem today. If I think about supply chains globally, it's about how do we solve for end-to-end efficiency.
Great. Thank you. Clint, you brought about an interesting perspective having or living in New York and saying how they were able to escalate some things because there wasn't as many people in there. Tell us back to around supplier diversity. Can you talk about an experience or a successful relationship that Capital One has had in the supplier realm with vendors?
You know, I think not one in particular, unfortunately, so I apologize for that. But I can just say, you know, in broad strokes, you know, the things that Ruben and his team are doing when it comes to our programs, and sort of back to the point I made about sort of developing skills and capabilities and sort of loaning out our experiences to diverse suppliers and positioning them for success. You know, I just think that's, you know, I am, you know, coming from the outside not that long ago, I am really impressed by the leaning in of the organization top to bottom. I mean, you know, my boss and his boss are as rooted in and focused on these activities as we are. And so I really, really appreciate that, given where I sit and the lean I've always had around supplier diversity. It's great to be, you know, with a company that has that kind of a perspective on it. So that one in particular, but
sure.
continuing the process to make sure that there are those stories and those those opportunities that are accrued to our diverse suppliers.
Absolutely. Those of us who were a part of the earlier part of the day got to hear some of those Capital One success stories that you all have with vendors. So that may have been an unfair question for you, but thank you so much. Yeah. Karen, I want to know what you want to see from your crystal ball. If you could put anything together, we talked about that. I think I asked, you said it was security as well? Certainly.
I did.
Okay, good. I don't want to leave anybody out. So now I'm going to pivot to Ruben.
Jeff, thank you. The final question, if you could have dinner with three people, living or passed on, who will they be? And we'll start with Clint.
So I told you, Ruben, I hadn't thought of these before. So the one, I mean, I got to tell you guys, I'm actually at my core, I'm a big nerd. I'm a really, really just horribly big nerd. I have an MIT undergraduate degree, so I'm very sort of that way. So Albert Einstein would be one. I would love to have that dinner conversation with him. A second one would be Harriet Tubman. I'm doing Ancestry.com and I'm doing my family tree, and I've traced it way back. And it's, you know, it's interesting and it's revelatory. And yeah, so that would be a second one. A third one would actually be, so my 7th grade English teacher. So she was instrumental in me thinking of life differently. I grew up in a small town in Arkansas, and it was really kind of her that planted the seeds in me to thinking about there's life and activity and opportunity beyond the horizon. And I very much appreciate that perspective and what it's done for me. So those are my three.
Thank you, Clint. Wendy?
So I have a couple. I'm married and I have two children, both of whom are out of college and fully employed on their own and live 2 hours away from us. So we don't see them anymore. You know, you kind of wish for those days where your kids grow up and they get off the payroll and they're successful on their own, and we've got that. But we don't get together, the four of us, very often anymore because of that. So we really treasure those times. So I think the three people I would have dinner with today, if I could, were my husband and my two kids. But, you know, if I thought about somebody else, I think, you know, Nathan Chen to me popped out as I was thinking about this. I just think he is such an amazing young man, and what he's been able to accomplish as an athlete and as a person is just truly amazing. You know, he's humble. He seems very kind, down to earth. He's family focused. We saw his, you know, put the medal around his mom's neck, which was awesome. He's also a student at Yale. He's a decorated Olympian. He's clearly trained for the most recent Olympics. So, you know, we talk a lot about work-life balance and how do you get it all in there. But I think he would have a lot of great insights on how to work effectively and balance life just to kind of meet your top potential. So he'd be cool to talk to.
Thank you, Wendy. Karen?
So, okay, three. Well, I would love to talk to Martin Luther King Jr. That would be one for me. That's a big one. On top of, in addition to actually being like, having gone through life at this point at my age, another person I would love to have dinner with now is my grandmother, who passed away when I was quite young. Part of the reason why was, so she came to this country from Norway on her own and kind of blazed her own path at a very young age. And now that I'm older, I have a great appreciation for really just how big of a thing that is to kind of make that type of change and embrace, you know, life in a different country and just really from a different approach and perspective, and really just picking her brain from that perspective with, you know, a number of years under my belt at this point, would be another great person. I did just now at this point in my life, just a different type of perspective, right? I think as you advance through the world, you think about family, you think about historical figures or people who went through large amounts of change, like Martin Luther King, and you really like to talk about it now to really understand perspective, just in the current forward-year perspective. And those are the two big ones for me. I think on top of that, in addition, this is going to sound weird, my third grade teacher, only because she had a major impact on my life. She like really was one of those people just opened the world of what was possible. And, you know, just going back and kind of revisiting that, when you think about an educator that really reached you, and being able to go back and just share those types of experiences with them. So those would be my three.
Thank you, Karen. And then Jude.
I love this question and the answer. So I have three. The first one was Amanda Gorman, the girl that did the inauguration poem with President Biden, because I just think the connection she has to society, the way she can talk about it, is second to none. I mean, and she's extremely brave. I would love to, you know, hear what she has to say about where we are today. The other one I had was Ray Dalio, who's actually a big investor. He does research about what's happened in the past 100 years and the 100 years before that, and can we predict, you know, crises, pandemics. He's quite an interesting writer. You probably all know him. I've read all his books. I'd love to hear more about that. And the third one, I think, is someone who's really a trailblazer, you know, for women, and that's Condoleezza Rice. I mean, she's again, the same theme, a very, very brave woman who stood up, you know, as I think the first Secretary of State, a female, Black American female Secretary of State. She's a scientist. I mean, I don't know how they put all that into one life, but I would love to learn from her and see what people's perspectives are.
Well, on that note, I really want to say the biggest of thanks to Clint, Wendy, Karen, and Jude. This has been an amazing conversation. I got so much, even though I was moderating, I still had my little book here and kind of putting down some notes to fall back on. But really, we appreciate you making time to join. I hope attendees, you got probably more out of it. Like I said, this is not going to be the only session CPO panel. We're definitely going to follow this up. But again, thank you very much for your time. And then for Jeff Conley, my fellow moderator, thank you. I really enjoyed doing this with you.
Thanks, Ruben. And I think every attendee probably feels like I do. We all tend to know what CEOs do, or we think we do, but now we have a real understanding of what the CPOs do. So thank you, Wendy, Karen, Jude, and Clint.
Thank you all for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Really enjoyed it.
To attendees, there should be a polling question on there now. If you don't mind, please go on and answering them, and then we'll come back with some closing remarks.
Well, that was outstanding. Thank you, Ruben. Thank you, Jeff, for moderating that panel. And I hope that Jude, Karen, Wendy, and Clint can still hear us. Just phenomenal information. I have 2 pages of notes. I learned so much. And so, Ruben, I want to thank you for the idea to have the CPO panel. It was just outstanding. And I look forward to how we're going to grow this conversation over the years. I'm going to look out to my peers to collaborate with them so we can expand this throughout the country. So thank you so much for the idea, and thank you for your team coordinating everything behind the scenes. We have some magicians working behind the scenes, so I just want to say thank you.
Well, very welcome. No, I enjoyed it. I really did. So thanks, Ruben. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you, Clint.
You're welcome, Clint.
All right, bye.
Ruben, we'll start with you. Your thoughts as a title sponsor? And award winner of the mostest?
No, I think it's been 2 really compelling days, a lot of learning. The only thing I wish we could have done was just have this in person so we could even connect more. But that day is coming, and hopefully very soon. Chapter 1, really, this is what we like to do, kind of lean in and support. So we're looking forward to more opportunities. The work, I really like the quote from earlier from Teresita, right? Like, I'm going to get it right this time. If you want to run fast, run alone. If you want to run far or farther, run with others. I think that should be something that we should all aspire to, pull others with us, invest in others, bring others along this journey. But these last 2 days have been really phenomenal.
Excellent. Thank you. Jeff?
Dominique, thank you. I'm so glad to have been a part of Deborah's inaugural event, our new board chair. And on my screen, she's right there. Wait a minute. She's beside me, wherever she is. I want to congratulate you. It was a great job, this annual meeting, the CPO Summit. And as well, thank you, Capital One, for all of your support. So I could not say it better than it has already been said. It was an excellent event.
Yes, thank you so much. I want to do a special shout out to those folks who are behind the scenes. Ruben, to Adrian, and to Tony and Johanna, and to Julie. That's the core team, and Margolette and Larry, my whole team. I'm not naming everybody, but I'm just naming the folks that, I know were on the core team to put this together. Did I miss anybody, Ruben? Because the team behind the scenes just was phenomenal. We looked better than we've ever looked before, unified.
No, I think you got everyone.
I got everyone.
And I think the one thing too, yes. And Dominic, I also want to talk about your leadership here. Like, we started early. We've been working on this for a very long time. And I think that intentionality, one of your favorite words, is what really resulted in this being successful. So be intentional, be proactive, and that goes to everything that we do. And this is a good example of it. So thanks for your leadership.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to allow you to close us out, Deborah, with an announcement about BOC. Will take us away?
Okay, great. Well, I just want to tell everybody that CVMSDC, they delivered over the past 2 days. And if you don't feel amplified like I feel, you must have missed something. What I can tell you is that we had a great 2 days. A lot of times when you attend a conference, right, you get a couple of nuggets, But today I got me some diamonds and I got me some pearls. So thank you, CVMSDC, and thank you, Capital One, for being the title sponsor. Now, Dominique asked me a question yesterday, and she said, Deborah, do you have anything to share? I have to go back to my childhood. You know, I grew up almost like an only child, and I failed the question, so I don't like to share. But today, I feel good about what we just learned, and I do want to share. Sunoco is proud to be the title sponsor for BOC. We look forward to seeing everyone in Charlotte, North Carolina. We'll be in person. Come, we're going to have our CEO there if his schedule allows. And so I want to thank you all for your time and participation, and we'll see you at BOC. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Deborah. August 8th and 9th, register early. That is a wrap, folks. Just an excellent 2 days. Thank you so much. All right.